Space is no longer the sole domain of governments and aerospace and defense companies. Businesses that pursue emerging opportunities now may gain a first mover advantage. As activity in space becomes more necessary, it will also become more commonplace both in the military and private sectors. Lower costs and greater access mean non state actors will also play prominent roles. The passengers who boarded commercial flights just after World War II didn't know that air travel would begin to soar over the next decade, nor did the masses who first logged onto the internet in the 1990s realize that computers would one day provide much of their news, entertainment, and social life. And today, few people understand that the space economy, broadly defined as activities in orbit or on other planets that benefit human beings, could soon transform how they live and work. Some hints of the coming changes are apparent, including the frequent headlines about SpaceX, Blue Origin, and other private companies launching their own rockets and deploying satellite constellations. These activities, once primarily the domain of government agencies, are now possible in the private sector because recent technological advances in manufacturing, propulsion, and launch have made it much easier and less expensive to venture into space and conduct missions. Lower costs have opened the door to new startups and encouraged established aerospace companies to explore novel opportunities that once seemed too expensive or difficult. The technological improvements have also intrigued investors, resulting in a surge of space funding over the past 5 years. The potential for innovative space applications is immense, especially if established aerospace companies form partnerships with businesses that traditionally haven't ventured into orbit. Pharmaceutical companies might establish a lab on a space station to study cell growth, for instance, or semiconductor companies might manufacture chips in extraterrestrial factories to determine whether any aspects of the space environment, such as the lack of gravity, improve the process. Such possibilities might have seemed like the stuff of science fiction a few years ago, but could now become an essential part of a business across multiple industries in the near future. But how and when should companies take advantage of their greater access to space and pursue emerging use cases? And how can they decide what opportunities are most promising when the technology is so nascent? Although much remains uncertain, companies that begin exploring these questions now could gain a long-term advantage. Space has long been a potent incubator for innovation, first from governments and large telcos, and now from multiple private companies as well. From the launch of Sputnik 1 in 1957 through today, the space economy has delivered most of its value through satellite services, including communications and data and image collection and analysis. Satellites help large companies with multiple tasks, including inventory monitoring in distant locations, instant authorization of credit card transactions, and international video conferencing. Consumers use satellite technology whenever an online navigation system pinpoints their location or when they make calls during plane flights or from rural locations that lack cell phone towers. And television viewers can thank satellites for beaming the signals that allow them to watch their favorite programs. The role of satellites in these activities is often overlooked. Many people may think terrestrial computer networks provide the necessary connectivity, unless a glitch occurs and draws attention to the unobtrusive technology operating in the background. According to the not-for-profit Space Foundation, the space economy was valued at $469 billion in 2021, up 9% from 2020, the highest recorded growth since 2014. Although the space economy now generates most value by enabling or enhancing activities on Earth, significant future value could arise from the functions that occur entirely in orbit, such as in-orbit servicing, research and development, and manufacturing. That said, the satellite services available today will remain important and could be critical to some emerging use cases. Researchers and other space enthusiasts have long discussed the potential for business activity in orbit or even the development of space cities, but now with lower costs and greater technological capabilities, the space economy may finally be at a tipping point where businesses can conduct large-scale activities in space. As costs continue to drop, even more companies may contemplate space ventures, and for the first time they might be able to profit from forays into space. More launches, lower costs. The costs for heavy launches in low Earth orbit, LEO, have fallen from $65,000 per kilogram to $1,500 per kilogram in 2021 dollars, a greater than 95% decrease. Computer-aided design, 3D printing, and other innovations have contributed to the cost reductions by streamlining the manufacturing process and improving supply chains. The emergence of new commercial launch providers that prioritize efficiency is also helping. For instance, engineers at these companies have developed reusable components for launch vehicles, which lower costs while promoting sustainability. The recent increase in launch frequency, particularly at SpaceX, is accelerating the drop in costs. Current R&D efforts could reduce launch costs even further. Relativity Space, for instance, plans to use 3D printing, artificial intelligence, and autonomous robotics to build a fleet of fully reusable low-cost rockets. The first launch for these vehicles is planned for 2024 at Cape Canaveral, Florida. Similarly, SpaceX plans to conduct a full-scale orbital test flight for its reusable Starship launch vehicle, the tallest and most powerful ever built, in late 2022. Smaller satellites, bigger gains. The size and weight of satellites have fallen significantly in recent years because of various advances, primarily driven by private companies such as the use of lighter solar panels and more efficient batteries. These changes, combined with the greater use of commercial, off-the-shelf components, have decreased satellite costs and made their launch and operation feasible for many more organizations. Greater satellite demand is also improving costs because manufacturers obtain economies of scale by increasing production volume. These lower costs have helped alter the space landscape. Large government satellites, some of which cost upward of $1 billion and tend to be deployed in orbits far from Earth, are now outnumbered by smaller commercial satellites in LEO, often deployed in constellations that can cost $100,000 or less. In tandem with a cost decrease for satellites, researchers have created new technologies such as higher resolution sensors that are boosting image capture, data processing, and other functions. Satellites can now collect, analyze, and transfer much larger stores of data than they could just 5 years ago. Greater investment, more innovation. Public agencies, especially NASA and the U.S. Department of Defense and intelligence community, have traditionally provided most space investment. While these agencies will continue to be a major source of funding, the combination of lower costs and more sophisticated technology is attracting more investment from both special purpose acquisition companies, SPACs, and private investors, a trend that is driving innovation. In 2021, private sector funding in space-related companies topped $10 billion, an all-time high, and about a tenfold increase over the past decade. The percentage of global space R&D funding coming from the U.S. government decreased from about 70% to around 50% over the same period. Meanwhile, the number of space-related startups funded annually increased more than twofold from 2010 to 2018. Commercial funding could surpass government funding within 20 years, a trend that government is largely embracing and that could lead to mutually beneficial public-private partnerships. Although much uncertainty persists, analysts are so optimistic about space that some believe it will become a $1 trillion industry thanks to enhancements to existing use cases and the development of entirely new applications. Much progress, including further reductions in launch and operational costs, must be made before many ambitious space projects can become a reality. But continued technology improvements are encouraging companies to increase their investments in the space economy now. The new use cases can be divided into two broad categories: space for Earth applications, which facilitate terrestrial activities, and space for space applications, which only involve activities that occur in orbit. Space for Earth applications. Satellites are becoming more sophisticated each year, allowing researchers to enhance existing use cases and develop new offerings. Many companies have recently deployed smaller, less expensive satellites in LEO, an orbit that is ideal for high bandwidth, low latency communications to provide better satellite connectivity. While most past efforts to launch LEO constellations failed because of high costs, limited demand, and inadequate funding, the situation is much different today. SpaceX's Starlink has already launched a LEO constellation and has paying customers for its satellite broadband network. OneWeb and Amazon's Project Kuiper, among others, also plan to deploy LEO constellations soon. Satellite imaging, another technology frequently used in current applications, has also improved and could enable multiple new use cases by providing more detailed and accurate information. Thanks to lower costs and greater access, space is no longer the sole domain of large aerospace companies or public agencies with vast budgets. It's a place that can deliver many benefits both on Earth and in orbit to almost any business sector. Across industries from pharmaceuticals to semiconductors, some companies are already expanding their space capabilities, exploring new use cases, or piloting innovative applications. In a few years, industry leaders may compare these early movers to businesses that recognized the internet's potential in the early 1990s and moved quickly to establish an online presence. The challenges ahead, both technological and financial, can't be understated, but the potential of space is also immense. Companies that ignore it either because they are bogged down in current challenges or underestimate the opportunities ahead might eventually find themselves scrambling to catch up to the early leaders.